The night Sarah decided to try dating again. She sat on her bathroom floor with her phone in her hand, staring at a dating app she had just downloaded. Her 3 kids were asleep, the house was finally quiet, and she felt this strange mix of hope and terror bubbling up inside her. She had been a widow for 2 years, and in those 2 years, she had convinced herself that her romantic life was over. She told herself that no man in his right mind would want to take on a woman with 3 young children, a dead husband, and a heart that was still healing from a wound that felt like it would never fully close. But that night something shifted. She realized she was tired of being lonely. She was tired of pretending she didn't crave connection. She was tired of telling herself she was fine when she wasn't. So, she filled out her profile, posted a few photos, and wrote a simple bio that said she was a mom of 3 who was looking for someone genuine. She hit submit and held her breath. What happened next was a punch to the gut. She got a few matches, but every single time she opened up about being a widow with 3 kids, the conversations would die instantly. The responses would go from excited and flirty to cold and awkward. One guy literally unmatched her after she mentioned the kids. Another guy told her he thought she was too much and that he wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility. She felt like a broken toy that nobody wanted to play with. The rejection stung so bad that she deleted the app twice in the first week. She would re-download it late at night, hoping things would be different, only to face the same silence. It made her question everything about herself. She started thinking maybe she was asking for too much. Maybe she should just accept that her life was about the kids and nothing else. Maybe the world was right about her. No one marries a widow with 3 kids. But Sarah was a fighter. She had survived the worst day of her life when her husband, Mark, died in a construction accident. She had held it together at the funeral while her kids cried, and she had to be the strong one. She had managed the finances, the school drop-offs, the nightmares, the illnesses, and the crushing loneliness of an empty bed at night. So she wasn't about to let a few bad dates break her. She took a step back and decided to change her approach. She realized that she was leading with her situation instead of leading with her story. She had been introducing herself like she was a problem to be solved, a burden to be carried. She needed to flip the script. She needed to show people who she really was, not just the labels society had slapped on her. She was a woman who had been through fire and came out stronger. Someone who knew how to love deeply. Someone who could handle life's chaos without falling apart. And that was something worth fighting for. That shift in mindset changed everything. A few weeks later, she matched with a man named David on a Sunday afternoon. David was a high school teacher, a divorced man with no kids of his own. He had his own scars, his own fears about being enough. But when Sarah told him about her life, she didn't just say, "I'm a widow with 3 kids." She told him a story. She told him about the night she was crying on the kitchen floor and her 6-year-old put his hand on her shoulder and said, "It's okay, Mommy. I'll help you." She told him about the resilience she had built, about how her kids made her laugh even on the darkest days, about how she had learned to find joy in the small moments. And David didn't run. He leaned in. He asked more questions. He was curious about her. He was seeing her, not her situation. He looked at her like she was the strongest person he had ever met. Their first date at a small coffee shop felt different from the others. There was no awkward tension, no trying to impress each other. They just talked. They talked about their past, their fears, and their hopes for the future. Sarah was nervous about her phone buzzing with texts from the babysitter. But David just smiled and told her he admired how devoted she was to her kids. He wasn't threatened by her responsibilities. He respected them. He told her about his own divorce and how it had left him afraid of getting close to people again. They realized they were both broken in their own ways. But instead of pushing each other away, they pulled each other closer. They understood each other in a way that people with perfect lives never could. They bonded over their scars. Over the next few months, Sarah and David grew closer. But she was terrified to introduce him to the kids. She knew that if the kids didn't like him, it would be over. She had seen too many single moms get their hearts broken when the kids rejected the new partner. So she took it slow. She introduced him as a friend first. David was patient. He brought board games and played video games with the eldest. He helped the middle one with science, homework, and carried the youngest on his shoulders during walks to the park. He never tried to replace their father. He just showed up consistently and quietly. And slowly, the kids started to love him. The youngest even drew a picture of him with a big smile and the words, "David is my best friend." Sarah cried when she saw that drawing because she knew then that she had found someone special. The turning point came about a year after they met. David and Sarah were sitting in her living room after the kids had gone to bed. The house was calm, the kind of calm that only comes after a long day of chaos. David looked at her and told her that he had never been this happy in his entire life. He pulled out a small ring box and told her that he wanted to marry her. He said he knew her past was complicated and that life with her would never be perfect. But he didn't care about perfect. He wanted real. He wanted her. Sarah was stunned. She had been told so many times that no one would ever want her that she had started to believe it herself. But here was this man, this beautiful, kind man, who had seen all her mess and still chose her. He said, "I don't see a widow. I see a warrior. And I don't see 3 kids that are a burden. I see a family that I want to be part of." That was the moment Sarah realized that everything she had been through had led her to this exact point. David proposed right there in the living room, with the messy toys in the corner and the pile of laundry still waiting to be folded. It wasn't a perfect moment by anyone's standards, but it was their moment. Sarah said yes before he even finished asking. She told him later that she had never been so sure of anything in her entire life. They got married 3 months later in a small backyard ceremony. The kids were the flower girls and ring bearers. It was chaotic and messy and absolutely beautiful. The youngest sneezed during the vows and had a booger hanging out. And everyone laughed. It was the most real, honest, and loving moment Sarah had ever experienced. She looked at David and realized that she had finally found someone who saw her completely. The good, the bad, and the complicated. And he wanted to stay. In the end, Sarah learned the most important lesson of her life. Love does not care about your resume or your past. It cares about your heart and your willingness to keep showing up. She had been told so many times that she was unlovable because of her circumstances. But the truth was, her circumstances were exactly what made her the person David fell in love with. Her strength, her resilience, her capacity to love deeply even after losing so much. That was what attracted him. She stopped letting the world define her worth and started defining it herself. And when she did, the right person walked into her life and never left. She went from whispering, "No one will marry a widow with 3 kids," to saying, "They just haven't seen me yet," with her head held high. And that made all the difference.